Hi, and welcome to the Lumida Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Gilder. On this podcast, we'll explore how to achieve and plan for a long, healthy life, as well as how to prepare for the inevitable and unforeseen through estate planning, insurance, and end-of-life decisions. We'll talk candidly with experts who advise high and ultra-high net worth clients so you can learn how to apply their strategies and tactics to your own longevity and legacy planning. Erickson, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Justin. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to have this conversation. As you know, think a lot about legacy and help my clients plan their legacy as well as contemplate my own
Mhm.
for any number of reasons. And so when we had an opportunity to talk and you shared with me the work that you do in reducing people's kind of legacies and thoughts and values into a film for them and their family, I thought, wow, this is fascinating. I'd love to know how you got into filmmaking and how within filmmaking you decided to focus on this style of filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And to answer your question, so my brother and I, when we were kids, we did the whole movie making thing, right? We enjoyed going outside, scripts, props, just the whole nine yards. Sports took priority during our childhood, and our love for filmmaking kind of went on the shelf for a while. Then we got into college and our sports careers ended. We both got injured. And so we kind of faced that identity crisis that a lot of athletes go through. We were like, okay, what do we do with our lives now? Sports are gone. It was such a big part of our existence. And so we put our heads together and we were like, why don't we get back into our childhood love of making movies, filmmaking? Put some money together and we got a camera and we just started to go out and shoot. We learned by doing. We weren't in college for filmmaking, obviously, but it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of watching YouTube videos. And one thing led to another, and we decided to start a company. And at first, we were dabbling in anything and everything, right? Trying to build a portfolio, doing a lot of free work, networking. And eventually, we wanted to challenge ourselves, right? It's one thing to go out and create a flashy montage, but being the storytellers that we were at heart, we wanted to do something a little deeper, something to challenge ourselves, our storytelling prowess. And so we decided to make a long form documentary on my dad's life. My dad passed away when we were kids. And we figured, okay, why don't we make something in honor of him, right? Something about his life, preserve his legacy in a way. And so that was a start of about a year and a half long process of creating a film. Um, 80 minutes it turned out to be. We interviewed about 40 people. He was my childhood baseball coach. And so in essence, that was his legacy, not just impacting my life, but all the players that he coached as well. And so one thing led to another. We created the film. We premiered it in my hometown. About 300 people came, which was super cool. And that got us thinking about just the concept of legacy preservation using the medium of film. So, to answer your question, it came from a very personal experience with our own dad's death, and coming to terms with that. And the whole experience was cathartic for us in a way. It was therapeutic, and we just started to think about opportunities in terms of how we can continue to do this for other families who might want a similar style documentary done on their lives.
So you and I share that in common. We both lost our fathers. My father now has been passed for 14 years. And I know that that loss has made me think a lot more about legacy and longevity as well. Especially, I have young children, and they're not old enough to have known my father. So my oldest is 12. And it's very interesting to think about how they will come to understand my father simply through stories that I tell and pictures and stories that others tell. And, you have now a unique asset that you can utilize to share stories about your father. So I'm jealous in a way. I may have to tap you to do something for my father. One thing I'd love to know is, did you learn something unexpected about your father during that process, a year and a half long journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. 100%. That was part of our desire as well throughout this process, was to learn more about him as well. We obviously had a good grasp on who he was, but exploring all the different people that we interviewed, their perspectives on my father, their personal experiences with him, we learned a lot of things about him that I didn't know, and that was super super special and emotional for us. Like we felt like we walked away from that experience learning more about my dad as a man, right? Like who he was during his childhood, what did he like, simple things that we just didn't know. And so that was something that going forward past this documentary, when we started to do it for other people, other families, um, we wanted to really implement that into the process and let these people know that our goal is to actually dive in and figure out things that you might not know from other people. That way you get a more robust picture of who your loved one is or who your loved one was. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, that was part of the most intrinsically rewarding part, I think, of the whole experience, was just feeling closer to my dad, despite the fact he had already been gone for a few years at that point, was just a deeper connection to him. So yeah, to answer your question, 100%.
You mentioned storytelling. You talked about, testing your storytelling prowess, you and your brother. And I'm curious to hear how you talk with a prospective client, whether that's a family office or an individual or their family, when exploring the concept of legacy and
Mhm.
storytelling. In particular, I'm thinking what kind of story they want to
Mhm.
tell, and then ultimately what kind of story is revealed through the process. And
Mhm.
if those differ, how you kind of reconcile that with the family.
Right. So when we set out to do these films, we make it pretty evident in the beginning that we're doing this to honor your loved one, right? We want to make sure that what we put together meets your vision, meets your goals, meets your objective for this project, right? It's one thing to, if we were to just be like, yeah, just give us the information, we'll just go run with it, do our thing, and then we hope you like it. The odds of them actually appreciating it as much as they could are slimmer, right? So we work hand in hand with the families, with the individual, in depth during pre-production to understand this person on a very, very deep level, and making sure that we craft the piece in a way that aligns with their objective for it. And we developed this formula that has worked for us. We call it the 7 storytelling pillars that we go into each project addressing. And that's the history of the person, that's the passion of the person, their individual process. Then it's the obstacles that they face. We feel like addressing the obstacles, the adversity, is super important. You can't have a good story without that healthy dose of conflict, right? Then after that is the successes, obviously their achievements, and then that after that is the impact as well, the impact that they've had on their loved ones, society around them. Then after that is the future. If the person is still with us, then we want to also explore their future goals, their future aspirations, because oftentimes these people, these individuals, if they're still alive, they don't like to quit. They want to keep going. There's always something next on the horizon. So also addressing that 7th pillar is important to us as well. But yeah, it's handling somebody's legacy, we recognize as a big responsibility, right? It's somebody's tasking us with this important preservation piece that it's a big responsibility, and we feel that. And so we go into it making sure that we give each person, each family, the the time, the space, the respect that they deserve, right? Because it could very well be the one thing that allows future generations to fully get a good picture, a good grasp on who this person is or who this person was. Um, so yeah, definitely some trial and error and figuring out our processes around it and working out the kinks, but we feel like we have it down now to a pretty good, might I say, science.
Yeah. Share a little bit more about the impact pillar. I think
Mhm.
that a lot of our clients and listeners think a lot about their potential impact. They've achieved a certain level of success. And for some, even though they continue striving for more investment returns, sometimes they have already achieved what they need to achieve, if you will, from a financial perspective, and they begin to shift their focus on impact.
Mhm.
What have you seen from that regard? And then through that lens, maybe tell us a little bit about some of your clients and the
Yeah.
family offices that you've done work for, so the listeners can get a sense of the scale of
Mhm.
your clients.
For sure. I think that honestly, impact is like the pinnacle of legacy, right? It's like the life that you were given, the life that you have lived, um, who have you touched? How have you touched? How have you touched, right? The who, the what, the how, the why. Um, and so impact, I feel like, is something that we really hone in on. I can give you an example. Right now, we're working on a feature length film for a family foundation out of Texas. And this man, like you said, I mean, he extremely savvy businessman, made some extremely wise financial decisions and became very, very successful. He came from nothing, right? He came from very, very humble beginnings in the rural South. And he became very financially successful. And he felt like it wasn't enough, right? It wasn't enough in terms of what can be done with that money. It's one thing to have a bunch of money in your pockets, make sure your family's taken care of, but what can he actually do with this money that's going to affect society around him? That way, when he leaves this world, he can rest easy knowing that he made a dent in a positive way. So this man set up a foundation, the mid '90s. Started off very small, but it's since grown to, I mean, multiple states. They have partners that do a lot of good in terms of mentorship for the youth, workforce development, creative expression, and that all started with his desire to impact the world around him in a more positive place. Um, so that's one example I can give you as somebody who used his wealth, used his resources to really make an impact on a broader scale, not just in his immediate ecosystem, right? Another person that we had the privilege of working with was a gentleman who migrated to America from Lebanon, war-torn Lebanon, at an early age. He came to America. I think he had like $50 in his pocket. Very humble beginnings. He lost his mother at a young age due to cancer. So he came here, didn't even know the language, and he started working for Mobil Oil. He worked his way up the line, and he became an extremely successful, might I say, mogul for Mobil. And his five children, who are grown adults now, they had been throwing the idea around about a documentary about their dad for a while because of that core desire to not only understand him more in his journey and the nuances, the intricacies of his journey, um, but so that they can show their kids as well. All their kids right now, this man's grandkids are quite young, and they're still having them. They're still popping them out. And so their desire was to really tell a robust um, picture of their grandpa, this man, what he accomplished, where he came from. Because it's one thing to say, your dad, your grandpa, he did very well for himself and he made a lot of money and all this stuff. But what's the story behind it? How did he earn that? Where did he come from? Everyone loves a success story, but more often than not, people like an underdog story as well. Somebody who's overcame those obstacles and built the life that they had. And so, long story short, with that client, his got to talking with one of his daughters, and their estate decided to pay for this production, and it was a 2 year long journey, and very, very special experience because we became like family to this family as well, and got to know them on a very deep level, because you have to, right? You have to put in that time in order to gain their trust and their vulnerability. That way you can get everything out of them in order to tell the story that you want to tell, right? Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the next generation, if you will, experiencing this journey that the you know say scion of the family has gone through to achieve the financial success that allows them to think about their impact and give back to the world. When your clients have gone to that step and said, we want to preserve legacy and we want to create an artifact that will be able to be viewed by future generations. Sure, it's about the person and about their impact, but I'm sure that there's a conversation on values.
Oh,
and like how do you pass down and tell stories of values?
yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that component?
Absolutely. That's huge as well. And what we do, we like to do the whole concept of show, not tell. So, in order to represent the person's values, we look for those small anecdotes, those small stories throughout their life that um, really symbolize their values without just saying, "Yeah, they were a very, very giving person." You want to look for those specific examples of specific stories that really drive those values home without hitting somebody over the head over it, right? So that's how we address that. And we feel like that's really important because understanding somebody's values helps you understand their motivations behind what they've accomplished. And I think that for future generations to understand the values behind the individual, the person, that is going to help them see or hopefully adopt those certain values as well by being able to see the positive outcome that those values led to for their grandpa, for example, right? So yeah, that's something that we focus extensively on, is exploring the values of the person, what's near and dear to them. um, yeah, I can go down a few different rabbit holes of those stories as well, but yeah, values are super important. I feel like we are what we do, right? And so being able to really pinpoint the actions, the habitual patterns of somebody, really drives home what they stand for, who they are as people.
Yeah. I think there's a good quote that says, "We are what we do when nobody's watching."
Yeah, yeah, there you go, exactly.
So you've had clients with very diverse backgrounds who have all achieved success. Have you seen that there's a common set of values, even though these people may have come from different parts of the world, maybe different religions, different living in the different regions in the US, working in different industries, but maybe there's something common about their value system?
Hmm. Well, right off the bat, I mean, this one's somewhat cliche, but the importance of hard work. And all these people that we've worked with, they make no there's no disguise that they sacrificed a lot, right? Like oftentimes you'll hear like, yeah, we didn't see him very much during the week, but he was always there on the weekends, but during the week he wasn't there, sacrificing, working those long hours. And oftentimes you hear at the end, there was some regret towards that, actually, and that they wish that they could actually have spent a little bit more time just enjoying life. Sure, they might not have accomplished the amount of success that they had, but they kind of come to terms with it towards the end. And of course, I'm speaking to the examples that the people were still with us during the time of filming. But there's some of that reflection at the end, now that they're older, thinking about the things they might have done a little bit different. Um, that being said, another universal value that we've seen reflected in a lot of the clients we've worked with is family. These people, despite the fact that they work their asses off, they all really valued the importance of family and being there for one another, supporting each other. One man said that, he gave me the example. He was like, whatever my brother needs, it's his. That kind of just symbolizes like his views on family. Integrity as well. A lot of them would echo the fact that when you're starting out, whatever you're doing, whatever industry, a handshake can go a long ways. Looking somebody in the eye, those type of more older school values, one might say. Um, but that, I feel like, has been huge when working with clients, is the integrity piece. Um, Keeping your circle somewhat small, because they value those people that have the same values as them, and normally that involves a really healthy dose of integrity and then doing what you say you're going to do. um, what are some other ones that really stick out? um,
Let
yeah.
me let me jump in there and ask you a question then. So interestingly, you say you have the seven storytelling pillars.
Mhm.
We at Lumida, we help families build family offices, and we actually have seven pillars of our family office structure. So that's
Okay.
very interesting.
Okay.
One of which is the next generation, planning for educating, providing financially for the next generation. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, for those clients that have been alive during the filmmaking process, you've probably had moments where they're speaking directly to the next generation, whether that generation is born yet or not, or whether they've reached the age for which their advice or story relates, right? Like maybe you have a 12-year-old grandchild, but you're telling a story about, like, hey, when you get to 30, think
Mhm.
about this or something. We have those conversations with clients about the next generation, but haven't had the opportunity to like think through it the same way you and your clients have. So I'm curious what kind of lessons similar to values and impact, right, have these individuals wanted the next generation to learn?
Mhm. That's a great question. From the ones that stick out for me personally, it's don't negate the importance of family. Like I was saying, like your family is your tribe. They're the ones who are going to be there for you at the end of the day. Blood is thicker than water. That is something that I know from clients we've worked with that has really, um, they really wanted that to be emphasized throughout the film in terms of the lessons that can be taken away from the person's life. Um, that's a huge one. Because the family unit itself, some could argue is being a little bit dissolved throughout the years. People don't stress the importance of family as much, at least in American culture. I would say that still exists a little bit more strongly, I would say, outside the US. But one can make the argument that the importance of family and sticking together is being a little bit diluted these days. That's something that's really been echoed. Making wise decisions with your money, that's also something. One of these people that we worked with, there was a point where he made some not so good financial decisions. He bounced back. It was all okay. But being wise with your money and researching very intensively the ins and outs of everything before you actually put your money somewhere. I know that was something that he wanted the future generations to really learn and to take his experience as a learning tool.
That's why there's great advisors out there.
That's why there's great advisors, and that's something that he said. He said, don't think you need to do it all yourself. Part of the reason is just not necessarily you being the one to do it, but trusting and researching the person who you do decide to help you with your money, because chances are they know a lot more than you because they've dedicated their lives to it and they've studied it. So absolutely to that point as well. Um, but yeah, that's a good question, and those are the main ones that stick out to me right now in terms of the clients that we have worked with.
So I know that you mentioned this athlete, you have an athletic background, played baseball in college, had some injuries. I'm curious how, your experience there and perhaps how that impacts your view on a topic that's near and dear to my heart and to our clients and impacts legacy, which is longevity. Does that come up in some of these conversations where people who are still alive are thinking about, how much longer they have? Um, or did people who have perhaps passed earlier, is the family thinking about that? Because we're now living in an era where people, absent, unforeseen circumstances or bad luck, which happens with certain types of medical diagnoses, there's advances in science and people are living longer, healthier lives. And that has an impact on your ability to create wealth, to create an impact, to pass on values to the next generation. So I'm curious if longevity ever comes up in the conversation or if it's something that you've identified without it being explicitly discussed.
Yeah, I would say without being explicitly discussed. However, a couple examples I can give you was like one man, for example, he had experienced a lot of health issues. He actually passed away. Well, his heart stopped. He had a heart attack, and he flatlined for a few minutes. Um, he also battled cancer. He saw his wife pass away from early onset dementia, and so there was this aura of death around him. There was this creeping realization of his own mortality. And so I do think that that played very much into the fact of the family wanting this story told before it might be too late. That kind of thing. I know that played into it. Another family that we worked with, the gentleman, he passed away from Alzheimer's, and his wife is still with us. She's in her late 80s. And I know that also played into the family's decision to want a film made while she's still around. She's still very cognitive, very alert. But you never know, because life is fragile. And just like that, one person can be here and the next it can be gone. It's similar to an athlete. You can be very healthy one day at practice, you pull your hamstring and you're done, that kind of thing. So that, I think, plays very much into the decision for these families, these clients, to move forward with the looming reality that you never know when your day can be your last, that kind of concept. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Did you think about that brevity of life more as a result of this process, or was it already front and center for you, given your experience losing your father?
Mm-hmm. It was more front and center to me early. I mean, I remember he died when I was 14, so um, automatically I start thinking about how unpredictable life is at a young age, and how when you lose a parental figure, a parent, life automatically seems a lot more unpredictable, and you're on shaky ground and anything can happen. So you learn that from a young age, and it makes you a bit of an outlier as a kid, as a teenager, because most kids, they still have their parents, the majority at least. So that was a realization that I learned early on, and I think it just was cultivated more and more throughout the projects that we were able to do, and I learned more. That I learned to value my life more. We talk about legacy. It's something that a lot of people probably don't think about on a daily basis. It's not something that most people are probably thinking every day about, but I've made it I've made it a goal that every day I at least do one thing, or I just keep that on my mind in terms of doing one thing that's going to put me in a position that way at the end, or when it all comes crashing down, I can say that at least every day I made one move, one step that put me into a place of where I want my legacy to be and how I want to be remembered. Um, and so I did learn a lot, or have learned a lot, and continue to learn a lot throughout this journey of producing legacy documentaries for clients, for families.
And how do you think about that every day? Like, do you have a prompt or a mantra, or what do you do to make sure that thought process occurs every single day?
Right. So I've just been doing it now for such a while. It just kind of comes natural to me. I don't have like a set, okay, 12 a.m. I'm thinking about legacy. But it just comes throughout the day. And I think about situations more so when I'm interacting with people or I'm doing a certain task, and it helps hold me accountable, because human nature, inclined to slack off from time to time, or be lazy, or whatever it is, or maybe cut that corner. And so it just keeps me in check. And obviously I'm human, I fail. But overall, I think it has helped me be more accountable to myself, and then also more reflective as well. It's really helped me cultivate that introspective nature too. I think that's really important, and I think that um, I think society, people in general, need a little bit more of that as well, to understand themselves better. That way, they can go out and create the lives that they actually want and the impact that they want. Um, so it's been really beneficial for me on a base human intrinsic level.
I feel you on that for
Mhm.
sure. So take me a little bit through the actual process of filmmaking. So you're approached by a family office, an estate, and they say, we want to make this legacy film. And you've mentioned that it's year and a half, 2 year long process at sometimes. What does that process look like, from pre-production to the viewing with the family?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So it varies depending on the scope of the project, right? Sometimes these people, they want more of a snapshot, like a 10 to 15 minute documentary. And those people more so, they want to use that as a tool. Maybe they have a business or something and they're trying to attract investors, they're trying to attract partners, they're trying to market. Maybe they want to use it as part of a digital sales funnel to increase sales or whatever it might be. Sometimes they want to use it to chop it up and use smaller deliverables like that can be used on social media. So in terms of like a 15-minute film, that normally takes about 6 months or so. But really, we lean a little bit more into the longer form, fully fleshed out projects. And those are more so for families, estates that really want to use this as a preservation piece, knowing that their family, their future generations, their close friends, their loved ones will be more apt to watch a 2-hour film. People's attention spans kind of suck these days. So,
2 hours is a long one. If you're getting
it's a
people
long
for
one,
2
right?
hours, that's, yeah.
We don't cut corners. No. But using that as the primary example here, something like that would normally involve at least 3 to 4 months of pre-production, right? So that is diving into who's going to be the mouthpieces for this story, who can be the mouthpiece for his early years, who can be the mouthpiece for his professional life or his personal life, whatever it might be. So we dive into identifying those people, and then that normally consists of a good 15 to 25 people at the end of the day, fully decided upon. And then that leads into preliminary interviews. So normally, since people can be all over, we do those over Zoom. So each person we like to meet with at least 1 to 2 times beforehand. We dive into their perspective, how we can use them throughout the story to drive the narrative forward. Because you don't want to ask 25 people the exact same questions. Everybody needs to have a different angle, right? And so pre-production normally takes 3 months. We also identify, aside from just the mouthpieces of the story, the interview subjects, we also identify, okay, where are the shoot locations going to be? Where can we actually film this, right? Normally for a 2-hour length film, we identify 4 to 5 locations. That normally is what comes with that package. And then we spend about 4 to 5 days at each location. That consists of shooting interviews with the people. It consists of shooting scene setting shots, B-roll, which is basically anything that's not like an interview. Live action segments, so maybe just, for example, following somebody around throughout their day-to-day life, getting them interacting with maybe their employees, et cetera, et cetera. Also collecting old footage that they might have, pictures from their early days. We found that is super important, and it's always a blessing when we have a client who has done a really good job of documenting all that stuff. One client we had, they probably had 5,000 photos, I want to say, of their early years. And it was great. I was stoked. But at the same time, they were like, here, they gave it to me on a drive. And, it was my task to sort through them all and figure them out and label who was who and all that. So put some gray hairs on my head early. But hey, it was worth it, though, because it really, really helped just create just that historical archival vibe for the film. So that's really important. And so normally production itself takes roughly a year, I would say. And then once we collect all the pieces, all the ingredients, it's time to bake the cake. And post-production is when it gets really fun. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's fun, but it's very grueling. The editing process, that's when you really put it all together, because going into a documentary, you obviously have an outline. You have what the story that you want to tell. You understand the variables involved, the people, the subjects, but you never quite know what you're going to get, right? That's how a documentary basically unfolds. And so post-production is when it all comes together. And that's very tedious, because it's not just crafting the story, it's the little things like audio adjustments, color grading, sound design, graphics, adding text when it's necessary. So that takes about 3 to 5 months on average, sometimes longer. So in total, it's a good year to 2 years, depending on the scope of the project. But I hope that gives you a good high level view of the entire process from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think the families are impacted by this? So they have this film, they've spent time and energy participating in it. It's documented their obstacles and
Mhm.
successes and impact and values, and then it's received. What happens next? Like
Mhm.
they come back to you and talk to you about what an impact this had on them, or
Mhm.
how is it
Yeah,
received typically?
sure. So one of our requirements, not necessarily a requirement, but we highly recommend that when they get the film, they set a time so that everybody can watch it together, right? Get the whole family together, whoever was involved. And that's been possible so far. So that's been really cool. And so they all watch it at the same time. And the feedback that we've gotten in terms of the impact is, number one, is that they felt like it really brought the family closer together because it's like this shared journey in a way. It's a shared experience. It's a shared love for a certain person or a certain family, right? And so we've been told that it's somewhat of a cathartic experience, the whole family watching it together, crying together, laughing together. They walk away from it feeling closer. At least that's what they've told us. So that's a big one. Another impact would be them telling us that I didn't know that about him, right? And so they found that out throughout the journey. They found that out through watching. Like one example would be this man, the man from Lebanon. I'll give you his example. His family didn't know that he was actually born under an olive tree in rural Lebanon. His mother couldn't make it back to the house in time to give birth, and so she actually birthed him under an olive tree, and the family didn't know that, and so they found that out, and they just thought that was just super cool. Like dad was born 100 yards from the house under an olive tree, the olive tree being like very symbolic in Lebanese culture, and just finding that out about him, um, that was really neat for that family. So um, that's another impact that I think these films have, is just them getting a better understanding of um, the ins and outs of their loved one's life. And like I said, I experienced that throughout making that film about my own father and learning, and just that sense of feeling closer to the person, whether or not they're still here or not.
How does the filmmaking process and the documentation of the legacy change when the subject is alive versus when the estate has contacted you and
Yeah.
you're doing this process posthumously?
Right. So when the subject is deceased already, there's definitely more. You got to do a lot more due diligence in terms of crafting the pieces and putting all the pieces together, because sure, their loved ones have a good idea on their story, but you're probably getting more and more perspectives, and oh, I think it was this year, or I think he was doing that at the time. But there's a lot more perspectives, right? When the person is still alive, admittedly, it makes our job a little bit easier, right? Because you can hear it exactly from the person what actually happened from X, Y, Z. Um, so there's definitely a lot more putting the puzzle together, might I say, when the person is not with us. But I like that. I like that challenge. It's like you got to kind of be that investigative journalist in a way, and we've gotten quite good at that. And that's been really, really fun. Is diving into what you can find, and sometimes it's not just from the people, like the subjects, right? You can find stuff online. We found some stuff, like some articles online about the certain subject that the family didn't really remember, they didn't know about. And so it's just collecting all the resources you can. And that's our responsibility as the storytellers, being entrusted with such a big responsibility, is that we can't skimp on that. Like if it's out there somewhere, we need to find it. We need to be able to say, okay, is this relevant to the story or is it not? Is this going to help drive the purpose of the story forward or is it not? But it's our job to find them and make that decision, in cahoots with the family as well, and bringing that to their attention. That's a great question. Yeah, we think about that sometimes in terms of like, it being a little bit more difficult for sure when the person isn't with us anymore.
Has this changed the way you want to live your life?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, definitely. It just, you see these working with these families who have created such legacies, such an impact. like I said, I want to be able at the end of the day to be able to have that type of impact. It doesn't have to be at the scale that some of these people have created, but just knowing that at the end of the day, I did what I could um, to impact the people in terms of how I was capable of. And I like to kind of say, like, my story, my legacy is telling yours, right? My story is telling yours. So I hope at the end of the day that people remember me as somebody who truly cared about these people, who did their best to create something that will be preserved forever. Um, and that's just using the skills, the abilities that I have, that I was born with, that I cultivated, and doing the best with those to create something that's special to other people, and hopefully impacts their lives and their legacies in a positive way. That's how I look at it.
And if you had to kind of like define legacy, I think we started with a little bit of a definition where you said that impact is probably the most important component of it. But how do you define legacy?
It's the culmination of your experiences, your values, your achievements, your traditions, all mixed into one. I know legacy is it's easy to understand conceptually, but actually articulating it is where it gets like arbitrary. But that's my opinion, is the culmination of all those things mixed into one, with a special emphasis on impact, right? Like, if somebody's not around to like experience your legacy, is it a legacy? I know that's getting like philosophical, that kind of thing. Like, if there's somebody who doesn't experience it or is impacted by it or recognizes it, did it exist? That's a philosophical rabbit hole, I suppose, but I think about that sometimes as well.
I think that's actually a really wonderful way to think about it. I mean, the
Yeah.
proverbial tree falling in a forest.
Yes, exactly.
If nobody
Exactly.
hears it, did it really make a noise?
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know.
do you think that for the clients who are alive or the family members who have continued to live past the person whose legacy they're highlighting, do you think that this has changed their life, like how they then live the rest of their life? Do they see this film
Mhm.
and adjust their behavior or give more or give less or invest more?
Mhm.
How have you seen anything like that?
So I can give you an example on that, actually. Like, one of the men who was still alive after this film was made, we heard from his family that the man seemed to be way more at peace. He felt like his story was told. He felt like it was out there. And we heard this from two of his children, actually, that they just saw a change in his behavior, like his aura. He seemed more, like I said, just at peace. So that was really reassuring to hear, because we felt like, we played into that. We created something that hopefully, definitely did help cause that. So that's one example I could give you off of that. In terms of other examples, like how their lives were navigated after, based off the documentary, in terms of practically speaking, like you said, maybe investing more, investing less, that kind of stuff. I can't speak exactly to that, but um, that's one example that really stuck out with me, is just having a more peaceful outlook, as if his story was told, it was out there, it was preserved. He can rest easy knowing that his family and his future generations will know who he was, what he went through, and um, yeah, the impact that he had.
You have had the privilege of helping families and individuals understand their legacy better and document that legacy. You talked a little bit about how that may impact them, how it's impacted you. You've defined legacy, but how do you want your legacy to be remembered by others? You mentioned a
Mhm.
little bit about it already, but if you could elaborate on being a storyteller of others.
Mhm.
What does legacy for you mean? How do you want to be remembered by others? And what will you do to make that happen? Will you make your own movie?
Ooh, I've thought about that. No, yeah, no. Thinking on that, just I think being present, being somebody who truly listened, gave people the space to absorb their story. I think there's something incredibly validating about listening to somebody's story and what they've overcome and what they've done, and adopting that certain level of empathy. Empathy is something I feel like that can be cultivated, but is more so innate in somebody. And luckily, I always have been a highly empathetic person. Maybe that stems from what I've gone through in my life as well. But I want people to know that about me at the end of the day, that I truly did care. You know, this is a lot of work, so I wouldn't be doing this if this isn't something that I truly am passionate about and truly care about. And having to sit down with people for hours at end, listening to them, listening to their stories. At the end of the day, I want people to see that, and to see that this truly was something that I love doing. It's intrinsically rewarding for me to be able to approach people and their stories, listen to them, learn from them. I've learned a ton from people and their stories as well. So it's highly beneficial for me, because I walk away from each project a little bit smarter in areas that I never would have thought I would have been smarter in. So I think at the end of the day, like I want people to, I think my legacy will be just being somebody who truly listened, who truly was there in a way. We've been told by a couple people that at the end of the day, when it was all over, they felt like we were family to them, because we had become so ingrained in their lives for a while, and learning things about them that other family members didn't even know. And that's cool to hear. It's cool to hear that we were able to earn that trust and that vulnerability from them, respect it, and then create something with it that can be remembered forever. So all of that, all of what I just said, summed up into one legacy tagline somehow. I'll let whoever makes the film about me create that. But yeah, there you go.
There you go. Erickson, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I'm really impressed by the conversation, the work you've done, and the insights you've been able to share today. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely, Justin. I really enjoyed it too. Thank you again for having me.
Likewise. Thanks for joining.